reorganize the fluff as a library instead of a command. We're going to put the command under CMD. LPG has discovered what's going on with the networking different in Vagrant and why Vagrant was doing that. The gist is here. You can come follow that. And we are going to be doing bridged by default. You can read it here. It's kind of hard to read here, but bridged is what allows your VMs to look like they're other computers, sitting on it, and like actually other hardware on your local network. That's really what people usually want. Vagrant actually assumes you want NAT because it assumes you're going to make stuff that's going to be facing the internet or something. And that's not the same assumption. I do want to just say that today is Sunday, so we have priority on beginner stuff. So if you do have questions during the day, come on in and ask them. Saturday and Sundays are primarily for beginners, even though we're doing coding for stuff that we're going to use with our beginners in the boost. So feel free to ask questions anytime. You're not going to be bothering us. We'll queue them up. Sell something to somebody. I've sold things to people as a missionary and as a director of sales for an internet service provider and as a cruise director and a cruise person and as somebody who owned a business. The truth of the matter is, if you're going to sell something, get somebody to trust you who uses your product or service, and then have them tell other people. I did zero advertising. I put something in a yearbook, but other than that, I did zero advertising during 8 years, and it was all word of mouth. So make something awesome, and then let people see it, and then they'll do this stuff for you. I mean, if you follow that model of sales, you'll end up saving a lot of time and energy, and you'll end up working with people that you like and love, because your customers will be people who've been referred by people who already like you, and so they can do all the selling for you, and you don't have to hit them over the head with a hard sell, which I really, really, really hate. So one of the things you can do in Go is you can provide we're rearranging this module so that we have a command in the command directory, and the top level is going to be a library package instead of a command. You can either pick command or library module, but you can't do both in Go. You can either have a command or a package. And I use main.go if it's a command, and then I follow, and then usually have a doc.go, so which breaks out all these documentation. So, and the convention is package blah does whatever. That's what you should do, and it has to be right before the package title. You can do that anywhere, but in their containers, whenever you need a device. And so, if you wanted to test network storage or you wanted to test network connectivity, you need it. If you want to test system CTL installations, or what's the difference between Red Hat and Ubuntu for real, including how they deal with devices, you need a VM. The cloud works. So when you're doing a cloud, you usually are on a VM, and then you put Kubernetes or something on there, and they have to run on that. So if you need to debug the container engine or practice using a container engine, that's underneath, that's hosting the containers, and you need a VM for that. It's the fastest way to test it. And I guess that's a great way of putting it too. Yeah, the best way to put this is when you need hardware. I mean, it's not real hardware, right? But when you need hardware, when you need to do something that involves hardware, you need a VM. And you won't be able to do that if you try to do that with... We filled up the disk, it killed Domino, and then we were trying to deal with it, and there was no hardware to look at and no way to test it. So I needed to be able to fill a disk safely and test what happens when that happens, so I can turn monitoring on with Isinga, getting monitors from Kubernetes. That's the kind of thing you would do with a VM. 2 days ago, I love WSL2. I still think it's the primary Linux desktop that everybody should be using. But one of the things that it does not do, first of all, it's broken on Cisco VPN and AnyConnect because of the fact that it's not an actual machine. And number two is because you can be able to emulate. I found out, 2 days ago, you cannot run systemctl on WSL2. And that's really lame for helping beginners, because they need to learn how to install software and start up services and stuff. And on every other major Linux distro, they use the systemctl whether you like it or not. Every time I talk about hardware, they said I don't need that for development. That's a typical developer thing to say. If you want a good laugh about that, go watch Guilfoyle and Dinesh fight it out on Silicon Valley. It captures that hatred sort of and friendship between developers and operations people. You don't need that. You just need good code. And friendship between developers and operations people. You don't need that. You just need good code. People who say those things are just really stupid, because you need both, obviously. It's like, if you're going to be a developer, you don't need to know any of that. Stop wasting your time learning about how computers work. You're just going to be a programmer for computers. You don't need to get mad at your friend or anything like that. You just need to say, you get your coffee. This is the proper response, okay? When they start giving you shit like that, you get your coffee, and you go like this. Okay. And you go about your business of learning how computers work so you can become the best kick-ass developer as well. That There's that one episode where Guilfoyle codes way better than Dinesh. Dinesh sees his code indirectly because he thinks a girl wrote it, and then he gets hot for his code. Because the people who understand operations and how computers work always code better than React people. What do you think of Rust and WASM? I think it's a waste of time. Just go look at all the jobs in Rust right now. Now just go look at all the jobs in Go or JavaScript or Java or any other language. That'll give you all the answer you want. I'm prioritizing stuff that actually matters, real applications. Name me one significant application that's ever been made in Rust without not counting Firefox or Mozilla. Rust is a piece of shit language that might have use someday somewhere, but has no practical application today and will keep you unemployed. And it took a person that I was helping to mentor to realize that on their own and start to learn Go. And now they have a really great job at InfluxDB doing Go and Rust. So don't be. The biggest problem with Rust is that it's unnecessarily complex for the name, the perceived name of type of safety, and it absolutely does not accomplish that. So nobody can get anything done in Rust because it takes so fucking long. Meanwhile, everybody gets tons of shit done in Go because of garbage collection. That's why garbage collection is a good thing. WASM just because, and the reason everybody keeps saying JavaScript Rust is the most popular language because a bunch of script kiddies from Stack Exchange who actually read those shitty things actually said, oh, we love Rust. Why? Because they want WASM and they're JavaScript people, and Rust is kind of like JavaScript. Lots of things we don't know what. It could splinter the whole world. It could make applications that are really awesome. It's clear that you can write in Rust or Go or whatever. I personally think it's faster to write WASM applications in Go, and people do, but people insist on writing Rust applications in WASM, which already has a sandbox. I wonder why the hell are you doing it in WASM with Rust? If you're touting all the awesome type safeties and stuff like that of the language, but if you're running it in a WASM sandbox, you don't give a shit because it protects you from that anyway. You might as well write Dino code. I do need to say that I'm not necessarily against Rust. I'm just against Rust for people that are unemployed and want to get a job and spend all their time learning Rust and Arch, and then they wonder why they can't pass any interviews and get any actual work. Because there's tons and tons of unfilled jobs. You get recruiters all the time, and then people waste your fucking time on those things. You're not going to be able to get a job. Cool and all, it's also completely obscure. It's built into Firecracker, and nobody knows about it. Look, if you really want to do a comparison of productivity, then compare everything that's been made since 2013 in Go and everything that's been made in Rust, because the languages have been out the same amount of time. Anybody who seriously tries to tell you that the same amount of productive software has been written in Rust since 2013, meanwhile the entire fucking cloud native world is written in Go, is a moron, because they're just completely being oblivious to the stuff that's actually happened out there. Something late around 2014, and people are still using C++ for all kinds of stuff, and there's a much bigger base for that. So, I'm super interested to see what Rust does, and specifically at Oxide Computing and Bottle Rocket. I think that's something to watch. But right now, it's completely irrelevant. The absolute tragedy of Rust is, and I deal with beginners all the time, there's people who want to get jobs in tech, and they decide to learn Rust as their first language. It is a fucking idiotic idea. It's a horrible idea. If you're telling people to learn Rust as your first language because it'll make you a better programmer, you're a moron. Yeah, for the record, I think Rust is way better than C++ for long-term sorts of applications. I think it's going to do really well, but it hadn't hit its stride yet, and now it's starting to, and I think that's important. I hate the syntax. I hate that the community says that it's political and decides to cancel people for no reason, including me. They banned me on Twitter. Rust. But I keep running into beginners who say, I started playing around with Rust as my first language. So what's happening is this intensity of this like total hype train about Rust has caused beginners to think that it's one of the better first languages to learn. A lot of them, they use JavaScript first, but some are actually jumping right crazy, amazing, awesome things in Rust. Brian Cantrell, I'm watching him like a hawk. I respect him deeply. I think he's an amazing developer with lots of like background. Gamozo has been doing some fuzzing and systems operations with it. These are the people that I'm interested to see what they do with it. But most of the people have no idea what to do with it. JavaScript is actually a great first language because you can teach things like, in JavaScript, you can teach Fado functions, anonymous, you can teach closures really well. In Python, you can't even teach anonymous functions. Lambdas don't count. I think learning C first they're two totally different languages, right? I would learn C way before I would learn Rust. I would learn C way before I would learn Rust so you can understand what safe code means. You don't even have any idea what that means, systems language and everything. But I don't feel like people are approaching Rust that way. It has high-level constructs like promises and stuff that are familiar to JavaScript people. So they think, and there's a lot of JavaScript people that are attracted to Rust. So they program Rust like they're programming JavaScript. And that's fine. But then when people say, oh, it's a low-level programming language, and they say, okay, it's going to be in the kernel, it actually isn't in the fucking kernel. Stop saying it's in the kernel. It got maybe approved eventually to write extra kernel mods, not in the core kernel. It never will be. Torvalds even said so specifically. 13. Let's go until, let's go for a half an hour at least. Okay, so let's go for 25 minutes. I'm going to be coding as fast as I can, and you can watch. I'm coding in Go. And you can maybe learn just by watching that. There's nothing here else to change. We're using YAML 2.0, YAML v2 library instead of v3, which changes a lot of the formatting and wrapping, which broke Kubernetes. It's kind of funny if you want to read my Zet about that. It's using command box. I can go in and go find my completions here. And rather than add, 32,000 lines of completion code, as is done for these others, I can use -c instead and get completion much more easily. Here I've added immensely to my completions because they have to have their own shell code that has to be generated and run every time. Whereas anything that uses command box automatically knows to just use its own thing. You can see right away that it does its own completion. The program has its own completion syntax, completion code and algorithm inside of it, which is best place to have it because now it knows how to do its own completion. It also embeds its own help. All right, that's what's wrong. All right, so that's definitely what's doing it. Okay, so we've separated this idea of library from command, and we're having trouble because we were embedding the fluff file into the init, and it's not there anymore. And command box wasn't that big a deal. Where if you have parameters here and you accidentally implement something here, it would break. It would say, I can't find it. It was just giving us a null error. So that's been fixed now, and it just shows you it's unimplemented in the help. It was one of the important things to know is that you, in order to unmarshal and marshal using the built-in methods, right, like in our test here, just YAML unmarshal, that you have to have fields that are exported. So this is not exported, right? You can, your struct can be private, but you have to export your fields. If you don't do that, it won't work. Let me show you what I mean by that. So then you go here and you run got, and it doesn't work. It doesn't get the values, right? You come down here and I make this uppercase here, and now it should work. It's uppercase. This is fine as lowercase here because of this. And then this is now uppercase, right? So now when we rerun the test, it should work. Oops, so it's undefined. Did I not save this? I didn't. There we go. V2 or 3. You can use YAML or you can use JSON. They both will work, and you only need to tag the JSON stuff. You do need to tell it you want the lowercase version, though, in order for it to work. And that will give you a pass. I can't turn my head. There's a lot of people with upside down hair. I think that's so funny. I needed that joke. I'm glad I read that. What's the Fluff project? Go read the README and then we can talk. The next major thing we need to do is we need to parse the whole YAML file and make sure it's getting loaded properly into the struct. And then we can move on to starting to test the different providers and how they use the struct. But we have to be absolutely sure that the default fluff.yaml file is getting parsed correctly. Go. That's actually not Go's problem. It's my problem. When in doubt, retype it out. Seriously, how many bugs have I fixed just by retyping? Let's not omit empty anyway, because we want to show them the default values. Let's just omit empty. You see what I'm saying? Omit empty it's a pain in the ass to type anyway. Let's just be really explicit and get rid of it here. It's not that hard. Here. It's a reference to, yeah, pi is a reference to the standard Perl-P-I-C. It's a thing to do. Don't do it unless you fucking really know what you're doing. But you see what it did? It got rid of it all. It transformed them all. That's a filter. That's the power of Unix filters. The power of Unix filters is in your hands. Oh, added a tab. Look at that. Look at that shit. I added a tab and it's kicking my ass right now. You seeing this? That's a Go problem because it normally does that. So you go space. Yeah, I've been burned by that the quotes, and I want to make sure people see this. So in the output, I got output with no quotes, and in the input, I had quotes around it, and it failed because the output in the YAML converter removed the quotes as being extraneous. Make sure you know how to do, if you're using Vim, make sure you know how to do setlist. When you use setlist, it automatically shows you the tabs so that if you bust anything that shouldn't have a tab, it'll do it the right way. We've done it. We've finished our model.go, model_test, and our fluff.yaml file passes now. So, I mean, that's like the most mundane thing that we had to do. But this is all good. This is all good and ready to go. So we're going to start writing our provisioners now to actually create the VMs. And this is that has no knowledge of how many instances it's creating. Each provider will just make one VM and be given the instance parameters for that. And that's it. And so we're just going to go ahead and start with that. We might get more later. Really tiny scope. You're one letter. Yeah, a little bit bigger than that. You're in a loop, maybe 2 or 3 letters. If you're going to be a constant, long letters. I'm also going to thumb my nose at the convention to use mixed case and camel case, which I fucking hate for internal stuff. But for all the external stuff, I moved it out. I moved out all the stuff that was in the command fluff. And so there's just main left now. And we've combined all of the commands that we're supporting, the top level command, and then all the subcommands in a single main file. And we're bringing up this stuff to the top level. That means that now init has its own top level function, which now has ... and it does its own thing. And then to give you a sense of it, so in here, init is called from here, and we're just calling into the top level library. Doing this, we're allowing us to have a top level library that can be used by people who want to write their own fluff commands by calling the highest level API programming API call at the top level, and then if they want to use the command itself, they can use fluff. That allows it the exact same functionality to embed it in any kind of thing. Over some shit like that, fine. I'll go take my $1 million of people and I'll go move over to YouTube. I don't have that kind of leverage, and people like me get banned all the time because we're just these little fucking peons, and so they can flex and do all their shit to us. I don't want to say more about that. We're doing find and executable anywhere, even on Windows. So something I haven't tested on Windows, now that I have Windows, is something I've always wanted to test. I want to see if the lookpath function actually will find VirtualBox, so we can create a function that says has VirtualBox, and we can detect that. This should be able to run in PowerShell or anything. You really even double click on it a long time ago that I totally forgot about. One of my people found it. Russell found it for me. This is actually a really kick-ass little function that when you run it, creates a distribution for everything. Boom, like that. On Windows, that the lookpath does not find binaries that are not in the path. And guess what? VMware does not install itself into the path and doesn't update the path when you go. So we have to create a utility that looks through everything to find the virtualbox.exe. All right, so rather than go ahead and build in something that traverses all the path, we're going to hard code this path into the app, and if it doesn't find it there, we'll give a warning that says, hey, we couldn't find it at the expected location. You're going to have to add it to your path. In which case, we'll find it in the path automatically, and we'll do lookpath for that. Exported. It can still be used as a template, and so we have this template configuration that does its job. And some.yaml has got this name field, which has been exported, even though the template form is something else. Go run main.go. Quick little thing here. If you want to see any of the lab work I've done, I just did another thing with a template check on privates that I talked about. It's in my lab, Artifacts Rob Lab. That's where you go for that stuff. Slow as shit, but it's just virtual machine stuff. So, hell, if this actually works, I'll have libvirt, VirtualBox, and VMware all working on a Windows WSL2 instance, which is crazy fucking amazing if you think about it. I mean, that's pretty crazy. Separated separately, installed separately.
because of licensing issues and because it's a core dependency. Thankfully, there's installers for all the major operating systems, so that's that big a deal. But we're not going to be able to bundle it with the thing and automatically install it for them. That's just not going to be a possibility. One of the possibilities was we were going to maybe avoid using chemoimg completely and avoid it by setting up different images to use for each of the different VMware, VirtualBox, or libvirt. And detect method is that, first of all, there's not a lot of cloud init images that are not QCOW2, which is the standard image format, and therefore they're very rare and scarce. We'd have to end up supporting our own libraries for these kind of things of importing images, because that's a pain in the ass. So we need to support the QCOW2 images, which are the standard because they're cloud images, and most of the cloud providers use KVM, which in libvirt, which is a Unix Linux thing, and therefore that's the default image format. So the steps are: install a terminal, Windows Terminal or iTerm2, depending Windows or Mac. Install Workstation Pro is recommended. It costs money though, or VirtualBox is just free, but the Pro one is more expected by the enterprise. Install chemoimg and install fluff. Ending. So, oh boy, here, let me have to do another thing. So it's been fun. We're wrapping it up here. We've had great time. I'm going on 13, 14 hours, but we got a good start on everything. A working version. Yeah, we have the bash version working, and we have VirtualBox and VMware both working in shell scripts, but we just have to convert those over to Go, and we're being really pedantic and finicky about what we put into it, which is good because it'll be more robust when we get it done. But that's the plan.